Hi guys, welcome back to History Help for You. Today we're going to be talking about society during the reign of Elizabeth I. So the kind of social hierarchy is kind of generally as follows. You have the monarch at the top. They have kind of absolute power due to divine right. You then have people like the nobility. These are usually in like your Privy Council and often I think in the House of Lords within Parliament. You then have the gentry, who are kind of like your local administration, and also your justices of the peace, your JPs. They're also in Parliament, can be in Parliament in like your House of Commons. And you also have your yeomen and your labourers. So yeah, you had a lot more kind of power being given to the gentry, such as the ability to go to go into further or higher education, like going to university, and obviously being given kind of office, being able to hold office like in local government, like justices of the peace, or becoming MPs within Parliament. During the time, you had a lot of regional problems, that being between the north, and also with Ireland, and also kind of the border itself. So the north was particularly difficult kind of throughout the Tudor reign, just because of the sheer distance from kind of London and the monarch. The north was also like a Catholic stronghold, and kind of resisted any kind of religious settlement that was Protestant. So it's going to clearly cause an issue for Elizabeth. There was also a decline in the wool trade, and it was only really dominated by like powerful families like the Percys and the Nevilles, who just kind of passed along power. So they were always a thorn in the monarch's side, because they're always there. And yeah, we'll see later on, and we also saw it when we did rebellions and plots, about the kind of the Northern Rebellion, or the Northern Earls. It's got a bunch of different names, but the Northern Rebellion. But yeah, you also had sort of fluctuating relationships with Scotland, and then we'll also have a look at later sort of differences with Ireland. Also, we have the Northern Rebellion, 1569. You've got sort of religious grievances. You've got political isolation. That being kind of a full, or kind of less power and influence from like the Percys and the Nevilles, with people like Robert Dudley and Cecil kind of being quite influential instead of the Northerners. Obviously, the plan was to replace Elizabeth with Mary, Queen of Scots, who would then marry the Duke of Norfolk. And it was also kind of an attempt to sort of preserve power, because a lot of sort of power is being centralised within London. It kind of happens throughout most of the Tudor reign. Yeah, the Percys and the Nevilles kind of want to maintain the kind of power and influence that they have. So Ireland is also quite a big issue, in the sense that for most of the Tudor reign, there is little control by the English over Ireland. The only kind of area of control is the Pale. This is kind of the area around Dublin, but anything past that, English didn't have any sort of control at all. It was usually run by like Irish chieftains. You also had like influential families like the Kildares and the Tyrones in Ulster, I think. And also Ireland being deeply Catholic and everyone else is Protestant is also quite an issue, because as we'll mention now, when we have the Spanish Armada, or after that fails, Spain try influencing the fact that Ireland is so close to England and it's also Catholic, so kind of try and stir the pot within Ireland. So Elizabeth tried what was called plantation. So this was setting up English Protestants on confiscated Irish lands to kind of help with some sort of control within Ireland. But this will then later lead to a rebellion. I think I mentioned it on there. Anyway, but you do later have the 9 Years' War or the Tyrone Rebellion. When we look at the thing that's specifically for like the later years of Elizabeth, I think that we mentioned, especially because of the kind of impact it has on Deborah, the Earl of Essex, and him kind of throwing a paddy. Anyway, just generally social discontent. Don't question the image. Generally social discontent. Inflation rose about 60%. And also you had enclosure again. Enclosure is everywhere within the Tudor period. Yeah, most people just don't like it. We also had social discontent and rights over food shortages and land rights, especially within the Midlands and the West Country. So you have quite a lot of population growth, and then vagrancy in turn because of this. So in 1550, the population was roughly about 2.3 million, but then jumped up to about 4 million by 1600. Most people still living in the countryside because urbanisation wasn't really there yet. But about 150,000 lived in London, and Norwich and Bristol had over 5,000 people. I think Norwich was about the second city at this time. However, because you have a higher population, also means there's a bigger demand on kind of like food. So that means there can be food shortages because you've got more people to feed, especially when you've got bad harvests during the later years. It just gets shocking. So you have a lot of people becoming vagrants, because can't afford to rent out their house or something. Can't afford to live really. Yeah, a lot of people left their homes in search of work, often going straight to London. There's quite a rise in vagrancy, and about 60% of the population lived at or below the poverty line at the time. That is crazy. As such, what we needed was some poor laws. So Elizabeth and her councillors worked on these poor laws. So in 1563, you've got the Statute of Artificers. This is kind of like a 7-year apprenticeship, and it regulated wages. 1572, you had the Vagabond Act. So you've got the deserving poor and the kind of able-bodied poor. In 1597, you've got the Poor Law Act. This is sorry. Oh, I'm about to sneeze. Anyway, this is the establishment of the Overseers of the Poor. Oh, there it is, sorry. The establishment of the Overseers of the Poor, funding relief, and there was compulsory parish poor rates. I think it was the time that people who were poor were kind of taken back to like the town or parish that they were from, and then kind of provided to there. And then you then have the Great Poor Law in 1601. This helped to formalise sort of local responsibility. So it meant that the kind of community and kind of organisations were more kind of responsible for the well-being of the poor rather than just everyone. But yeah, you've got a bit of continuity and change. You've got the rise of the gentry, and there's a bit of a decline in the nobility. Regional challenges. The north is especially a pain, and we'll look a bit more at Ireland in the kind of later years of Elizabeth. And there's also discontent, especially because of the sort of population growth and the impact that has on vagrancy. But there's some sort of attempts to combat this with the poor laws. So that's it for this one, guys, and I shall see you in the next video.